Hi, it's Jeff Ryan. Welcome to Tales from the Cabin. This week I wanted to talk about something I've been thinking a lot about lately, which is the role of fate in our lives. I think the phrase tempting fate has preconditioned us to believe that fate is mostly a negative thing, that we don't want to tempt it, that we want to stay between the lines and play things safe. And for me, playing it too safe is a joy zapper. Surely there's a difference between being reckless and allowing for things to happen that are not planned. And I try to find that healthy place in between. That's where I have found most often great things happen to me. If I'm taking things as they come, as opposed to coming up with a plan that I'm trying to make life adhere to. I'll give you an example. When I was a kid, my family used to go boating a lot, and my dad always steered the boat, always. I can't even think of a time when he didn't. But one day we were offshore, and he turned to me and said, "I think it's time for you to take the wheel. And I'm going to give you a compass bearing, and I want you to stay true to that course." And I said, okay. So I took the wheel, and right in front of the steering wheel was a compass. And I grabbed the wheel, and I held really tightly to it, and I really tried to stay true to that setting, north-northwest, and I wasn't going to allow the boat to get off that setting. And we were going into the wind, and the boat was bouncing. It was a power boat, not a sailboat. And I'm trying to hold on to the wheel and just hold that line, not divert whatsoever from that line. And it was rough, and the boat was jumping up and down, bouncing in the waves. We were taking spray. And my dad said, "Keep a loose hand on the tiller, loosen your grip on the wheel, and allow the boat to move. Stay the course within a couple of degrees, but don't try to force it." And I'm really glad that he didn't tell me that first, because the lesson was so much stronger when I got to feel what was happening when I was holding too fast to that course. The ride was bumpier. I was trying to will that boat into where I wanted it to go. But when I let off, when I loosened my grip on the wheel, and I allowed the wind and the waves to take the boat, and I kept the boat going in the basic direction I wanted to, but stopped fighting it, it was a much more enjoyable ride. I was still in control, but I was giving up part of the control. And that really stuck with me my whole life. It's happened to me every time I go on a hike, whether it's short or extended. Things change. The weather changes. How you feel changes. The group you're hiking with changes. Their abilities. A lot of things. Your mental state. And your ability to keep the trip going in the general direction, but not trying to force it into a certain outcome. Those are the spaces that allow for joy to creep in. And today's story I'm going to tell has to do with that, because I've largely tried to live by that principle of not holding too tight to the wheel. And it's made me a generally more happy person, but it's also given me an approach to life and to work that I really think is healthy. So back in 2016, I had completed my first book, It was called Appalachian Odyssey, a 28-year hike on America's Trail. That in and of itself, a 28-year journey, resulted from not trying to force feed a journey into 1 year, because I couldn't do it. But I was trying to figure out how to promote that book, and I had also long thought of a dream that I had of owning a Volkswagen camper van. And everything sort of came together when I was looking at Volkswagen camper vans, and the only ones I could find online were for sale out west. I'm in Maine. And it would require going to places like Tacoma, Washington, buying a van, not really knowing the backstory of the van, and coming home all the way across country before I could outfit it for what I hoped would be a successful journey, my first writing tour as an author. I was riding through my hometown, and I looked over and there was a Volkswagen van for sale at the end of a driveway. It hadn't been there a few days before, and I decided it was meant to be. I went and looked at the van, and it turned out that the guy who owned it had meticulous records of taking care of it over the years, which was a plus given the fact that it was a 1985 van. It was 30 years old. And I was going to hopefully set off on this adventure in it. So I put together a tour and was able to book in advance more than 50 stops along the way. The first leg was from Portland, Maine to Atlanta, back up the East Coast to Richmond, Virginia, DC, back to Maine, Albany, New York, Chicago for a few, Milwaukee, and then a side trip to the Apostle Islands in northern Wisconsin. Minnesota, I went to the Twin Cities. Then I went down to St. Louis, where I would have a 2-week hiatus before I had to be in Cincinnati for my next signing. You would think that having put in so many miles, which was somewhat grueling, I'm not going to say it wasn't, and there were a lot of unexpected twists and turns in a 30-year-old van. It wasn't all smooth, but because of my philosophy of keeping a loose hand on the wheel, as it were, I was able to absorb things like having to stop for a few days and order parts for the van, or stay in a campground for a few days while I was waiting for parts, or to book an appointment with a mechanic if I needed it. Anyway, long story short, I'm sitting in St. Louis and I have 2 weeks to spare, and I suppose a lot of people would have just hunkered down or somewhere around St. Louis or somewhere between there and Cincinnati, but instead I had decided to visit a friend in Albuquerque. So I drove to Albuquerque, and the van started acting a little bit quirky on the way, but I made it to Albuquerque. It was overheating, and I would stop and start, and I rolled into Albuquerque, and I had dinner with my friend. I started staying at a truck stop in Albuquerque and didn't have a great feeling about it. It was busy all the time. Everyone was idling. I just wasn't getting any sleep. So I decided to start making my way west towards Sedona. When I was signing books in Freeport, Maine, this guy had come into the store that I was signing books at, and he said he had written a guidebook to Sedona, and if I was ever in that neck of the woods, I'd have a free place to stay. So that stuck in my head, and I decided this is the time for me to go to Sedona. So I hit one of the first rest areas west of Albuquerque, spent the night, got up in the morning, started driving, and pulled over at another rest area and called this guy and left a message saying I'd like to take him up on his offer. And a little while later, I got a phone call back, and he said, "Man, this stinks. I'm not there. I'm not in Sedona. I'm actually in Asheville, North Carolina. And I said, well, that's okay. I'll find somewhere else to stay. And he said, no. I routinely leave my key under a flower pot in the back, which is probably where everyone leaves a key. But anyway, he gave me directions and said, feel free to stay at my place. I won't be back for 2 weeks, but stay as long as you want. It's yours. I'll tell you where stuff is, what the Wi-Fi password is, and all that jazz. I'll send you an email with all that in it. So anyway, I was making my way to Sedona, and the van kept overheating, and I'd get off at different exits and let it cool down and check everything and keep going. By the time I got to Sedona, the van literally died as I was rolling down the main street of Sedona. And I pulled off into a parking area in front of a hotel. And right then, this guy was coming the other way in a Tacoma. And he pulled in next to me, he rolled the window down, and he said, hey, is that a 1985 Vanagon? And I said, yeah, how do you know that? And he said, I own one. And I said, really? And he goes, it overheated, right? And I said, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, do you have a business card with you? And I said, yeah. He said, give me your business card. I'll text you directions. I live about 1.5 miles from here. We'll get your van fixed and get you back on the road. But do me a favor. Don't start your van until 17 seconds after I leave. I said, okay, sure, whatever. So he leaves, and the text comes with directions to his place, and it had been about 12 seconds. So I just went to turn the key. I'm like, 17 seconds, whatever. So I go to turn the key, and my phone chimes with another message, 2 words, not yet. So the guy knew I was going to try to start it. I thought that was pretty funny. So anyway, I get to his house, and sure enough, there's a white version of my van in front of his house, and he helped me start getting all the stuff out of the back because the engine's in the back of the van, and I had to unload God knows how much stuff out of there. I had books to sell and camping supplies and hiking supplies and you name it. Anyway, got all that stuff out, took the lid off the engine compartment, and he says, really, it's not me that's the master mechanic, it's my friend Miguel up in Durango, Colorado. What we're going to do is a FaceTime with him and do a video and show him what's going on. So we got Miguel on FaceTime, showed him what was wrong. Miguel said, this is what you need, get a pencil and a piece of paper and write all this stuff down. It's about 5 or 6 parts. It's a vacuum lock issue, vapor lock. And anyway, write these things down, go to Napa. If they charge you more than $90, you're paying too much. Off we go to Napa. I get a ride with my newfound friend, and it came to $78. We go back. Miguel walks us through how to fix it, turn the key. Never had an issue with that vehicle again, at least in that way. The guy saved the day. Fate intervened. Fate intervened because I had this wild-ass idea to go to Sedona, which I always wanted to do. I took a little bit of a chance in doing it, which left room open for things to happen that I hadn't expected. And lo and behold, I got my car fixed by the help of 2 strangers, one of whom was an expert on the subject. Not only that, but I not only had a free place to stay, but it was a really nice place to stay. And I got a really nice email from Dennis, and he told me, you know, these are the places to shop. There's a guidebook that I wrote on top of the refrigerator. You can have it. It's got all sorts of day hikes in Sedona in it. These are the 3 that I suggest to get off the beaten track. And so I went and I spent 5 days hiking in Sedona, largely had trails to myself, had a great time, and then white knuckled it getting to Cincinnati on time, but I did that. And it was just an amazing experience. And a lot of people would say and do say, what are you, nuts, getting in a 30-year-old van and going to 28 states and having to be in all these places? And maybe so, but I designed the trip to have some buffers in it, just like a hiking trip. And I allowed it to play out that way. And it brought me so much enjoyment to do that trip. It's still paying dividends to me. And it's just one example of how I try not to over-design my life, try to leave room for the unexpected, and let those things play out. And if the unexpected is good, then it's really good. And if the unexpected is bad, I'm better equipped to be able to handle it emotionally. And also I've got the room to be able to accommodate that in a way that everything's not over-engineered and adds a lot of stress because I can't handle it. So something to think about, something I think about a lot, something I try to plan for. And it may not work for everyone, but boy, oh boy, does it work for me. So I'm glad you tuned in this week. I hope you enjoyed thinking about the hand of fate, which isn't always bad. And hope it gives you something to think about. And if you like this story, please stay tuned. More like them will be coming. Please check out my books at my website, jeffryanauthor.com. Or if you would like to support my work in another way, you could buy me a cup of coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Jeffrey Ryan. It helps keep my coffee cup full and allows me to take the time to share these stories with you. So take care, and I'll see you next time.